Welcome to our channel, World Inheritance. Today we will talk about the first female ruler in the world, Neet. Who is Neet? Neet is a great Egyptian queen from the first dynasty. She is a woman of a unique style. She ascended the throne of Egypt after the death of her husband, then shared the kingship with her son Den in the rule that he inherited from his father as a young child and still under guardianship, thus becoming the first woman to rule in the history of Egypt and humanity, as she ruled Egypt for about 10 years, 2939 to 2929 BC. She lived in the late pre-dynastic era, about 3100 AD, BC, and the name Neet means beloved Neet. She was the daughter of King Jur, the wife of King Wajid, and the mother of King Denver. She had ambitions for power and did not empower anyone in the affairs of government, and she assumed the regency of the throne, and as soon as she empowered Neet she intended for her son to rule until she withdrew from the political scene as a queen participating in the government and even the decision-maker in it, to the role of the queen mother who supports her son's rule and stands behind him with counsel and advice and by participating in opinions if necessary, and Neet's position as a ruling queen and not just a king's wife or a king's mother, so she had two royal tombs with the same architecture as the royal tombs, in both Abydos and Saqqara. No accomplishments were mentioned of Queen Neet other than preparing her son, King Den, for rule. It is the greatest achievement of Egyptian civilization in preparing one of the greatest king of Egyptian civilization, who was interested in expanding the Egyptian borders and preserve them. During his reign, Egypt enjoyed economic prosperity and political and social stability. He also laid the foundations of the sacred royal rule that the kings of Egypt followed until the end of the Pharaonic era. Queen Khentkaus ruled ancient Egypt during the 4th dynasty, and some historians believe that she was the daughter of King Khafre, the wife of Shepseskaf and the mother of Userkaf, and she has a cemetery in Giza located near the pyramid complex of Khafre. Historians believe that this connection may mean that there is a family relationship. Historians have confirmed that Khentkaus played an important role in the succession of the 4th and 5th dynasties, and assumed many titles for herself, such as the Queen of Upper and Lower Egypt and the mother of the King of Upper and Lower Egypt. She was also the legitimate heir to the throne and transferred legitimacy to the 5th dynasty. Some historians believe that she was the wife of a man who was not of pure royal blood. She built a pyramidal temple on the Giza plateau. There, the first betrayed cows, which is what we are talking about now, in the 4th dynasty, and there the second betrayed cows in the 5th dynasty and did not assume power. Queen Nefertiti, daughter of Pharaoh Amenemhat III, has an older sister, Nefertari. Some historians believe that she was the legitimate heir instead of Nefertiti, but Nefertiti died young, and according to what the Papyrus of Kings mentioned, Nefertiti ruled Egypt for 3 years and 10 months and 24 days and was mentioned in the late 19th century BC. Amenemhat IV is the brother of Nefertiti. He died without leaving any male children, and therefore she was the only heir to the king, and thus she ruled Egypt, while other historians believe that Nefertiti participated in ruling the country with her brother, Amenemhat IV, and others believe that she shared the rule with her father. Few traces of her were found, although many headless statues were preserved, including the base of a statue of a king's daughter that was discovered in Tel al-Jazar and bears her name. There is also a bust in the Egyptian Museum in Berlin, and it was lost in World War II, and it has been proven that it belongs to her. The queen left very few traces, and on top of it, a cylinder made of white slate painted blue, and its size is larger than usual, and it is the only piece that has been found so far of Queen Nefertiti is located in the British Museum, and the cylinder is engraved with all the coronation titles of this queen, as the cylinder showed that the queen's mother, the Horite, was Nefertari, which means beloved of the sun god Ra, next to the name of Nabdi, sister of Karbnebtai, which means good leadership, lord of the two lands, and other titles. Queen Hatshepsut is known as Gamedamonius Hatshepsut. Queen Hatshepsut was born in 1508 BC. She is the eldest daughter of Queen Ahmose and King Thutmose I. Her grandfather is Ahmose I, the founder of the 18th Pharaonic dynasty, and the owner of the great victory in liberating Egypt from the Hyksos invasion. She is considered the only legitimate heir to the throne. The country, if there is no legitimate male heir. Queen Hatshepsut studied the sciences of behavior and correct morals, in addition to philosophy, arithmetic, reading, writing, the rules of construction, and language, in addition to the correct religious rituals. She also had to strive to learn governance. The sayings of the ancient Egyptian sages, which people passed on among themselves, such as anyone from the ruling family, princesses, and children of ministers, and she was afraid of the teacher who was teaching her, because he did not give importance to the status of his students, as he was an example of justice that should be applied to everyone without any privileges. Queen Hatshepsut shared the rule with her father, as she was his legal heir, knowing that he died when she was 20 years old, so she had to bear the responsibility. She assumed power alone, but the male authority, society, and priests stood in her way, and tried to marry her to her half-brother, Thutmose II, despite his poor health and little experience in managing the country's affairs, and thus she became merely the king's wife and nothing more. Queen Hatshepsut's actions during her reign built an army, strong and active in his sea trips with neighboring regions. She opened many mines and quarries that had been neglected before her rule, especially copper mines in the Sinai Peninsula. It became active in the trade movement with its neighbors, as it reused the canal linking the Red Sea and the Nile River, cleaned it, and facilitated the path of the Egyptian fleet towards the Gulf of Suez, then towards the Red Sea. She ordered the construction of a number of buildings in the Karnak Temple, and also built her own temple in Deir el-Bahri in Luxor. She ordered the construction of large naval ships to stimulate the movement of the Egyptian commercial fleet, and used them to transport obelisks that she ordered to be added next to the Karnak Temple to glorify the god Ammonius. She ordered a mission to be sent to the city of Aswan to bring many huge stones to build facilities. She also created 2 great obelisks of granite in order to glorify the god Ammonius, then transport them across the Nile River to Thebes. It contributed to the prosperity of trade as a result of the import of some types of fish, by sending a large fleet to the Atlantic Ocean. Trade missions were sent on board many ships that navigate the Red Sea, loaded with gifts and goods such as papyrus and flax seeds, to the country of Punt, now Somalia, and southern Yemen, where the king received the mission well, and returned it loaded with abundant quantities of wood and incense, predatory animals, precious stones, ivory, and leather. Queen Hatshepsut died after assuming 22 years of rule of the country on the 14th of January 1457 BC. Her grave is located in the Valley of the King's area next to her father's grave. Tausert means strong, and she was the last king of the 19th dynasty. She ruled for 2 years as the sole queen of Egypt and assumed power under difficult political and economic conditions. During her reign, the Egyptian empire lost its revenues from abroad, there was great inflation, a severe food shortage, and an intermittent civil war broke out. Tausert tried as much as possible to preserve the state, but she died in mysterious circumstances, and with her death the 19th dynasty ended. Nefertiti was one of the most mysterious women in pharaonic Egypt. She was a powerful woman who lived in ancient Egypt. Nefertiti was a queen who ruled Egypt alongside the pharaoh Akhenaten, her husband, and that was from 1353 to 1336 BC. She ruled the modern state of ancient Egypt with her husband, Akhenaten, or Amenhotep, and her rule was marred by a period of religious and cultural unrest and clashes with the clergy, as she and her husband called for the worship of the sun god Aten, which caused the anger of many temples of the gods Ammonius and Osiris, and she was loved by her people. Nefertiti is the daughter of I, one of the senior advisors and army commander of the king of Egypt. She is a queen who belongs to the 18th dynasty in pre-Christian Egypt. She later became the queen and first lady of the pharaonic state. After that, she became the mother-in-law of the famous Egyptian pharaonic king, Tutankhamun, who was her daughter's husband. Merit-Aten gave birth to 6 daughters, which made her husband think about other wives to give him a son. In fact, this was done and he had what he wanted, as one of them gave birth to the famous King Tutankhamun. The names of Queen Nefertiti's daughters are Merit-Aten, Mekhet-Aten, and Enkisenpa-Aten, which is who was married to King Tutankhamun, Nefer-Nefer-Aten Tashiri, Nefer-Nefer-Ra, Stepan-Ra, and it is worth noting that the meaning of the name Nefertiti is the beautiful woman has come. The tomb of this great queen was found near the tomb of her husband, King Akhenaten, after a period of time. One of Nefertiti's daughters, Mekhet-Aten, died and she was greatly saddened by her. After that, the mention of the queen became extinct from that historical era, and it is said that she died out of grief for her daughter. After the death of this queen, she was defamed and all history related to her was erased by the clergy in the temples and their sympathizers from Egyptian politicians. The ancients because they were at enmity with her and her husband, Amenhotep, regarding the way they worshipped the gods. There is a sandstone statue of Queen Nefertiti that was discovered in 1912 AD. This statue became a global symbol of both female beauty and power, as it was found by the famous German archaeologist Ludwig Borchardt in an area called Amarna. It is a bust of the head and face of Queen Nefertiti, and it is a famous statue. The statue was transferred to Germany in the same year and remained in Germany. During World War II, the Americans found the statue and took it to the United States of America and then returned it to the West German Museum. Since that date, Egypt has been demanding the return of the statue again to Egypt. Nefertari is the wife of Pharaoh Ramesses II, and she is his most famous royal wife. He had married her at a time before he ascended the throne, and their marriage resulted in at least 4 sons and 2 daughters. According to historians' accounts, it is believed that they had more than 6 sons, and their names are Her-Kebishef, Miriatem, Perihironymph, and Miri, and the names of the 2 daughters are Henutoi and Miriatin. He married her when she was only 13 years old, while he was 15 years old. In fact, there is no information about her origins except that she was from the nobility class, and she had another name, which was Nefertari Meretmut, which means beloved of the gods of death. She was considered a great queen because of her clear impact on the civilization of ancient Egypt. Nefertari ruled for 24 years. She was educated and able to write and read the hieroglyphic language, and she also used her skills in diplomatic work. Nicknames for Nefertari. There were many titles given to Nefertari, including Sweet Love, Lady of Grace, Great Praise, Lady of the Earth, God's Wife, for which the sun shines, Wife of the Great King, Wife of a Strong Bull, Lady of the Most High. Nefertari died in the year 1250 BC, and this is not certain, as it is likely that she died at an age that varied between 40 to 50 years, meaning that she died after ruling for approximately 25 years, and her husband, King Pharaoh Ramesses II, built her in the largest and most beautiful tomb found in the Valley of the Queens. Is a distinctive tomb and a wonderful example of ingenious decoration. This tomb was decorated with charming colors and frescoes that reflect her daily life. Some gold and beautiful ceramics were found in it, and a pair of sandals made of palm leaves. In a description of Nefertari's tomb, it consists of an upper room. The lower burial chamber, connected by stairs, has drawn on its walls drawings of Nefertari and a number of gods, insects and animals, in addition to hieroglyphic magic spells, which are drawings that illustrate the passage through the underworld towards eternal life. As for the temple, it was built only 100 meters away from the temple of Ramesses II, and it is located in Abu Simbel. This temple was built by order of Ramesses II in appreciation of her. This temple is the smallest temple, and a great statue of both Nefertari and Pharaoh Ramesses II appears in it, and some small statues of royal children next to the 2 huge statues. Inside the temple there is a huge vertical hall containing columns with carved tops in the shape of Hathor's head. Queen Berenice II, called the Good, was the queen of Egypt and the daughter of Meges, king of Cyrene. She was also the wife of King Ptolemy III Euargetes. She was born in Egypt in 280 BC and she married him before he went to Asia Minor for his famous war with Seleucus II. Queen Berenice remained in Egypt to rule until her husband returned from the war. This queen lived a legendary life very similar to Greek epics. At the time when she was engaged to King Ptolemy III, her mother married her to the Macedonian Demetrius, nicknamed the Just, and Berenice killed him. King Ptolemy III's marriage to Berenice II coincided with his accession to the throne in 246 BC. Together they founded the Serapeum Temple in Alexandria, and they also founded many temples in the south of the country, such as the Temple of Edfu. She ruled Egypt during the Syrian war led by her husband against King Antiochus III, and she urged poets to immortalize her husband's victory. Poets also praised her wonderful beauty, such as Callimachus, who wrote a famous poem entitled The Lock of Berenice's Hair praising the queen, and the poet Catullus translated it into Latin. She ruled Egypt during the Syrian war led by her husband against King Antiochus III, and she urged poets to immortalize her husband's victory. Poets also praised her wonderful beauty, such as Callimachus, who wrote a famous poem entitled The Lock of Berenice's Hair praising the queen, and the poet Catullus translated it into Latin. The legend tells that Berenice cut a lock of her hair and sacrificed it in the temple of the goddess Aphrodite in the hope that her husband would return safely from his campaign. But the lock disappeared from the temple, and this was explained by the fact that it ascended to the sky to become a star bearing the queen's name. Callimachus's poem presents this legendary account with much glorification and exaltation of the queen's person. After the departure of King Ptolemy III, Queen Berenice and her son Ptolemy IV ruled the country, but she was killed. It seems that this role was greater than her capabilities and she was unable to control the country. Later, her eldest son, Ptolemy IV, poisoned her when she tried to put her younger son on the throne. In 2010, the mission of the Egyptian Supreme Council of Antiquities revealed the remains of a temple to Queen Berenice II in the Kom-el-Dika area in Alexandria and a large cache of statues that has so far included 600 statues of the Ptolemaic era has different sizes and types. The remains of the temple discovered so far are 60 meters long and 15 meters wide. The remains of the temple extend down Ismail Fahmy Street. The temple was also used as a lime quarry, which led to the loss of parts of its stones. A large number of statues were also found representing the goddess Batet, the goddess of fun and pleasure, who was depicted in the form of a cat, and the temple was built for her. 600 statues were found in 3 places, each of which constitutes a cache of a large number of statues of cats, children, and women made of limestone, pottery, and bronze statues, and other Egyptian gods and goddesses made of faience and terracotta, along with a statue of Lysis with the child Horus, Harpocrates, on her lap, and statues of the god Ptah, the god of Memphis. Cleopatra II was one of the children of Ptolemy V and a sister of Ptolemy VI and also of Ptolemy VII and Ptolemy VIII, who married Junior II, Queen of China. She shared the rule with Ptolemy VI and VII, and after the death of Ptolemy VI she assumed power with Ptolemy VII. Then she ruled with Ptolemy VIII after the death of Ptolemy VII. Then a major revolution broke out against Ptolemy VIII, fled to China and met Juneri, Queen of China, so she took power alone, and after a while he regained power, but she did not like it, so she united with the Queen of China, Junior II, but Junor betrayed her when she knew that Ptolemy VIII would win, and united with Ptolemy VIII against Cleopatra II, and Ptolemy II won. VIII with Junor and they killed Cleopatra II and they got married, but the people of China did not agree for him and the people of Egypt to unite, so they removed Queen Junor from her throne. Because of this, the queen launched a war on China with her husband, Ptolemy VIII, but China won and their new queen, Darnisia, and Junor committed suicide, fearing that they would take her. Ptolemy was held hostage, and after Junor's death, Ptolemy married again and they gave birth to Junor III. This novel has no strong attribution. Cleopatra VII was an Egyptian queen who came to power after the death of her father, Ptolemy XII, in 51 BC. Cleopatra was one of the famous figures in history. Cleopatra means the glory of her father in Greek. Cleopatra joined the dynasty that ruled Egypt for more than 250 years. Starting with Ptolemy I, who served in the 4th century BC as a general during the reign of Alexander the Great, and ending with the rule of Cleopatra. Cleopatra was born in a palace located in Alexandria, where this palace included 5 sisters and brothers in addition to Cleopatra, whose mother's identity has not been confirmed by history. It is noteworthy that their mother was the sister of Ptolemy XII, who was called Cleopatra V, as the pharaohs in the past used to marry full sisters. Influenced by the life of the gods they worshipped, Cleopatra was merciless and was the only member of her family to learn the Egyptian Coptic language. The rule of 18-year-old Cleopatra and her brother, Ptolemy XIII, began when her father, Ptolemy from Alexandria, as a result of the instigations of his advisors, Cleopatra fled to Syria, and there she formed an army of mercenaries to regain the stolen throne. Cleopatra returned to Egypt in the 48th BC to confront her brother Ptolemy XIII on the eastern border of Egypt in Pelusium, to coincide with the escape of the leader Pompey from Rome to Egypt as a result of a civil war between him and Caesar, before he was assassinated by Ptolemy with her brother, as she was able to reach the palace by smuggling herself inside a carpet, and her brother Ptolemy XIII learned of this when Ptolemy a major victory against Ptolemy XIII in the Battle of the Nile, which resulted in the restoration of the throne to Cleopatra and her younger brother, Ptolemy Caesar. A year after Caesar returned to Rome, invited Cleopatra to visit him, and she arrived there in the year 46 BC, and with her was her younger brother and her husband according to Ptolemaic customs, Ptolemy with her young son. She ruled Egypt, and there was a stable period of rule until the Nile flood came, and the situation in Egypt changed to complex conditions of hunger and poverty. Then, after the killing of Caesar, Mark Antony was sent to Egypt to discover the truth about Cleopatra's loyalty to the leader, and from here he fell in love with Cleopatra, and then Antony returned with Cleopatra returned to Alexandria after the defeat of Octavian in 34 BC, and they married, declaring Cleopatra's son, Caesar Ion or the young Caesar, a legitimate son and legal heir to Caesar, which angered their rivals, who raised claims that Antony was seeking to hand over Roman possessions to Cleopatra and make Alexandria a Roman capital. And then Cleopatra and Antony gathered their armies to defeat Octavian, but they were defeated and fled to Egypt. Cleopatra's death was tragic because of Antony, who stabbed himself after receiving false news that Cleopatra had died, and then news of her husband Antony's death reached her. Cleopatra buried her husband, Antony, and then committed suicide by using a small poisonous snake that bit her in the arm. Thus, the career of Queen Cleopatra, who was 39 years old and continued to rule Egypt for nearly 22 years, ended. She was married to Antony for 11 years, and they were buried together according to their wishes. Shajarat al-Durr, one of the women who ruled Egypt, and she is the only woman who was able to assume the throne of Egypt and rule it after the Islamic conquest until now. Her name is placed alongside Hatshepsut and Cleopatra. Shajarat al-Durr is the servant of Sultan al-Salih Najm al-Din Ayyub, the 7th Sultan. The Ayyubid state, his wife and the mother of his son Khalil. Much of Shajarat al-Durr's biography remains unknown, regarding the dates of birth, death, lineage, burial, and even the manner of death. Where did Shajarat al-Durr come from, and what is the most important thing that is not known about her? What is agreed upon historically, as mentioned in many books, is that she was a slave of King al-Salih Najm al-Din Ayyub and enjoyed favor with him such that he never left her when he was traveling or at home, and she gave birth to him a son named Khalil, who died young. It was said about her origin that she was of Turkish or Khwarezmi origin, and she might be Armenian. The beginning of its mention dates back to the year 1239 AD, when King al-Salih Najm al-Din Ayyub included her among his wards after the death of her husband, King al-Salih Najm al-Din Ayyub. Shajarat al-Durr was pledged allegiance by the Mamluks to be the Sultan of Egypt, and she remained for nearly 2 months until she was sent to her husband's son Turan Shah, who he had only been in power for a few months until she sent to kill him after he threatened her for money, and she married Emir Is al-Din Aybak, and that was the beginning of the Mamluk state. But after he gained power and Shajarat al-Durr learned of his intention to marry the daughter of Badr al-Din Lulu of the king of Mosul, she plotted to kill him, so she killed him. It is reported that after the killing of Aybak and the attempt of the Mamluks of Is al-Din Aybak to kill her, she resided in the Red Tower in the mountain castle, and was protected by the Salihi kings. Aybak's wife and his son al-Mansur were inciting against her, but she was found murdered and stolen outside the castle. She was carried to her burial place near the scene of Mrs. Nafi